Hi, I'm R.A. Salvatore, Bob Salvatore. Been writing fantasy books for 25 years now and going strong, and you're listening to GenreTainment.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of GenreTainment over at sci-fi-pulse-radio.com. We're your hosts, Marks
and Julie, and GenreTainment is where we talk about what's happening in the world of film, TV, and web series. This is where we give you interviews with writers, directors, producers, and actors in both independent and not-so-independent creations. It's the first episode of GenreTainment in 2015.
Woo.
Yay! Now, we took January off, but we are back, and for this episode, we are speaking with New York Times and USA Today best-selling author Rachel Caine and award-winning web series creator veteran Blake Calhoun about their new vampire web series Morganville, which is based on the best-selling young adult urban fantasy book series The Morganville Vampires.
We discuss the challenges of adapting a book into a web series, the challenges of casting, funny stories on set, tips for authors and web series creators, and much, much more.
Now, we want to point out that the music you just heard at the beginning of the show was a snippet from the theme song for our web series, Reality on Demand. It's a song composed and performed by our friend T-Sean Hardy. You can find our web series at realityondemandseries.com.
I also wanted to mention real quick before the interview that I was asked to join the International Academy of Web Television's Award Committee for this year's IWTV Awards.
Yay!
It's been a great honor and experience. We're working hard to make this year a special one. So if you're a web series creator, please consider submitting your series for consideration. You can learn more by going to iawtvawards.org.
Now let's get to our interview with filmmaker Blake Calhoun and author Rachel Caine.
Welcome to the show, Rachel, and welcome back, Blake.
Yeah.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, well, for our listeners who may not be familiar with the Morganville setting, story world, either in the book series or the web series, can you describe the series to them?
The Morganville web series is actually based on a series of novels that I wrote starting in 2006, and there are 15 novels in the series. It's been published in 26 languages worldwide, I think, to date.
Oh, wow. Now, I'm sorry, how many books did you say there are in the series?
15.
Wow.
I know. It still boggles my mind, too.
And still going?
Actually, Daylighters was the last one, and it came out late last year.
Oh, okay. Now, can you tell us a little bit how Morganville Vamps differ from, say, Buffy the Vampire Slayer or True Blood? And can you confirm whether or not they sparkle in the sunlight?
I can neither confirm nor deny any sparklage, but I wanted to approach the vampires in Morganville a little bit different. I wanted them to be a little bit old school in that they are really self-interested. Everything they do is about them. And if you can serve their plan, excellent. If not, you're probably roadkill. But and I also like kind of likening them to the mafia. They run Morganville a little bit like the mafia with fangs.
Well, that makes sense. Yeah, let me just say that's sort of I have to say the joke about the twinkling thing is like a personal beef I have, because as a human being, I actually have an allergy to the sun, so I can't be out in it, and it really pisses me off when vampires get to go out and bask in the sun and sparkle and be happy.
See, what you need is some SPF 50 glitter lotion.
That's what I need. I do the SPF 100, and it really doesn't do much.
Now,
I can confirm there was no sparkling, though.
Okay, no sparkling on the web series.
No sparkling on the web series.
At least, yeah, exactly. At least in the digital variety of the.
For very practical reasons, because that glitter gets everywhere. It doesn't go away.
I've heard there's a behind-the-scenes video with somebody sparkling. I don't know.
One thing, let me interject real quickly. One thing that I found interesting about the series, because when I was first approached about this, Twilight and the other True Blood, as you mentioned, these were all on TV, and I was like, what makes this different? And to me, it's that it doesn't take the romantic kind of twist like Twilight does. That's not even a twist. The angle that probably most vampire shows take. This is about it's like real people in college in an unreal situation. Or does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Well, and like Rachel
so
said, they're more old school vampires. They will kill you.
Right.
Yeah, but it's also a lot of fun, and it's got a lot of dark humor, and so that's where it plays in kind of to the Buffy world a little bit too. And of course, we had Amber Benson in the show, so that's
yes, that's a nice nod to the Buffy the Vampire Slayer fans.
We love Amber. The other thing that kind of made it stand out a little bit was that of the 4 main characters, precisely 0 are vampires.
Ah. These are the trials and tribulations of the humans having to live in the shadow of the vampire world.
Exactly.
And no chosen one vampire slayer, I'm guessing, right?
Not that I'm sure Shane would like to believe that, but no.
What inspired you to take this from a book series into the web series world? And how did you two even meet up, actually?
Yeah. Well, actually, I had a conversation early on with Felicia Day, and Felicia was the one who actually said, you might want to think about doing something as a web series format. And we'd had options on this material before that had gone on for quite some time, but they just, it was one of those things that I thought this would be super fun to do in a really different format, because no one else that I was aware of had done any direct adaptation of young adult novels into this kind of in this kind of format. And Felicia actually introduced me to Blake.
And you're both based in Texas, right?
Yes,
Dallas, Texas.
Technically, I'm Fort Worth, but close enough.
Yeah, and it was interesting because we call her kind of the digital matchmaker for this. And in the end, we went out and we explored a lot of different ways to produce the show from a financial aspect, and we ended up doing a Kickstarter. And once we had a successful Kickstarter, Felicia came back in on the post side or the distribution side and wanted to team up to release the show too. And they actually also in the end helped co-finance it. So she introduced us, and then in the end she helped get the show out to the world too.
Oh, good.
That's good.
Great. Is she a fan of the series, I guess? I know she's an avid reader.
She actually hates the books and the show.
She was just being nice. No.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
No, I think that's how they met. They met it because the way, ever since I've known Rachel for the last 2-3 years now, all she does is travel and do all the cons and does book signings around. And so I guess her and Felicia had met at Dragon Con or one of those. I don't even know.
Well, technically I do also write, but yeah.
Oh yeah, forgot about that part.
We love Dragon Con.
Oh yeah, Dragon Con.
I love Dragon Con too. I think I first met Felicia though at I want to say Comic Con, San Diego Comic Con.
Ah.
That's a big one.
That's the big one.
So when adapting a book property into a web series or whatever, any visual medium, there's a lot of challenges there.
Yeah.
I think one of the first challenges I like to ask you about is the casting of these characters, because people have, for years, these books have been out.
Everybody has in their own mind who these characters are, what they look like.
Yeah,
and
including the author.
Yeah.
And so
especially the author.
Yeah, especially the author. And I'm just wondering if you had any particular casting challenges when trying to find actors to embody these characters.
I think the biggest challenge in any book adaptation is precisely what you just said, that people have their own cast in their own mind. And it's going to be really difficult to get a cast that everyone agrees with, even on a small scale, much less when you let it out into the wider world. But we actually had, I think, really good fortune all the way around. I love the cast.
Mm-hmm.
There's a difference between the production side, or the producers producing it, and then the fans, because I think in the end I know we were actually really happy with our cast, and for the most part the fans have been too. But just as you alluded to, there's been a lot of debate on, in particular, the Facebook page for the show, with the book fans saying we thought they should be this or that, and of course they all think of Hollywood level. Why
didn't you get Jennifer Lawrence to do that role or something?
Well, we all wanted David Tennant, and
Oh yeah.
For a variety of things, and that's all fine and well. It's not. It's as much it is as a financial one. It's just a reality one. With those type of people are not accessible at this. For this show, typically speaking.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Well, was there one particular actor from the get-go? As soon as you saw the performance, you're like, "Wow, that person is that character."
I think Amber was the one that we because she was involved with the Kickstarter. We had thought about her from the get-go. For one, she was already friends with Rachel because she also writes young adult books, and we thought she'd be perfect for the Amelie character, and she turned out to be just that.
Was there anybody that came in and auditioned for a character and you thought, that's different than what I had always envisioned that character, but wow, if that doesn't work?
I would say Aphomia Kalameskel, who became our Monica.
Mm-hmm.
She's just, she came in, I think, for a different part. And
she did. She came in for one of the mean girls, I forget.
Yeah, Gina, I think. But she was so convincing. She had such presence that I just saw her immediately as Monica.
Okay. That's always fun when someone comes in and does something with a character you hadn't really thought of before.
Yeah, but in the end, everyone worked together so well, and I think that they gel. And now I see these, which is cool. I now see these actors as these characters in my head. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like Robert Picardo, who was just great.
Oh, yes.
He wore a really, really good wig that we had designed. But a lot of people don't recognize him because of he's known for being bald with the in Star Trek and et cetera, being a hologram. Mm-hmm. And but the wig looked so good on him, and he just did such a good job. It sort of transformed him into this character, I thought.
Yeah, we loved. As soon as we saw him on screen, we just busted out laughing. We were like, "It's Robert Picardo in a wig,
yeah,
and a tie-dye shirt. I love it."
That might be the only time you will ever see him in a tie-dye shirt.
It was just so cool.
Yeah. And so he and Amber we cast out of L.A., and then the rest of the cast was cast out of Dallas with some really talented actors who had differing levels of experience, but they'd all had done a few things. Although Aphomia, who she just mentioned, this was Aphomia's first show ever to do, and I thought she did a really good job.
Oh wow, yeah, and that'd be a little bit intimidating to have Robert Picardo and Amber Benson.
Yeah, no, I agree. And then Lindsay, who played Claire, was great. And then Ben Easter. Ben Easter actually wasn't local. I'll take that back. Ben is an L.A. actor who I think is based out of Des Moines, Iowa. Anyway, everybody did really well, and it's interesting. And at the beginning, Rachel actually did a fan search for a couple of the leads. I can't remember. Was it for Claire? It may have been for Claire. Yeah. And she did an internet search to let some of her fans audition, and we got several hundred submissions, and we weed those down to a few, and then at the end they didn't make the final cut, but that was fun too.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that is cool. That's a cool idea. So yeah, Robert Picardo and Amber Benson I thought were really great. They really transformed themselves, especially Amber, who's like very drastically different kind of character versus what she was in Buffy. I thought they were both really great, and your cast is great too. I was like,
but she's so shy and quiet.
Not this Amber
Not
Benson.
this one.
No.
While we're talking about characters and such, whether it's the book and web series, however you want to look at it, who's your favorite character, each of you, and why in the story?
I think personally my favorite character, in terms of just being fun to write, is probably my crazy vampire mad scientist Myrnin. Because he's insane, but he's also got a good intention most of the time. Sometimes that means he thinks for your own good he's going to put your brain in a jar. But that doesn't make him a bad person. I think he's a lot of fun to write, and we had a great little scene with Chase Jeffrey, who was also out of LA, I believe, who just really got across the insanity of Myrnin in a very short period of time.
Well, I think as any writer, the fact that you can describe that character as the crazy mad scientist vampire would just have to make them your favorite.
What about you, Blake?
I would probably say, I mean, it's hard to pick a favorite. I mean, obviously Rachel created these characters, so it's probably a little different for her. They're like her children, I guess.
Yeah.
But for me, I really like the banter and the relationship between Eve and Shane. I just think that's fun. And it's probably even more so in the books than it is in the web series, because obviously in the web series we did one season of approximately 70 minutes of content, and you whittle down an entire novel into that. So you lose a lot, and you get a lot, but you also don't get everything. But point is those guys are fun, and they have a great banter about them. And so probably Shane would be, especially from the books. Knowing these actors, though, once you know the actors and everything, they all have a kind of a place in your mind or in your heart that you enjoy.
Yeah, I can imagine. Now, you talked about some of the difficulties of adapting a book to a web series, and that is always a challenge, to take a book to any sort of visual medium. Now, were there any scenes or story arcs that got lost in the adaptation, either that, were good and easy to cut, or some that were kind of painful and you wish you'd been able to put in?
You mean from the get-go?
Either from the get-go, from the books to the script, or from the script and then to the cutting room floor.
Yeah, well, I'll let Rachel talk about the scripting, because I know there's actual characters that didn't make it out of the first book, and of course there was also characters like she mentioned, Mirnan. He didn't really appear, I believe it's until book 3, but we went ahead and brought him in as a little teaser, and then also the cop, Hannah Moses, actually comes in later, I believe, but she can speak to that. But yeah, we had to, as it typically goes in the editing, we definitely had to cut some scenes that, you really like and that you don't want to cut. And a couple of them had to do with Shane and near the end of the story. And we are going to release the show on video on demand and also a DVD. What we're going to have is chock full of extras and deleted scenes and that kind of stuff. And so we're going to do a commentary track as well.
Oh, that's always fun.
I think the fans, her book fans who become fans of the series will enjoy that. We'll go into some of that there. But as far as the scripting, I'll let Rachel talk about that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I decided to do this a completely different way, because it was many years, at least relatively speaking, that I wrote that first book. And even though I had the world really, really down in my head, I thought, well, let me just write down the points that I remember quickly from the first book, and then try to just incorporate those into a script, and then go back and reread the book and see how I did. And it was amazing how well that worked, because I realized once I'd gotten those important points, everything else I really could leave out in the long run.
Mm-hmm.
That's an interesting approach. So you just wrote down what you remembered from that book, the high story beats, and then you just wrote it, the first draft, then went back to the book, actually looked through and see what you missed, and realized they weren't necessarily that important. That's cool.
Well, I think they weren't critical to the main plot of the story,
mm-hmm.
and there were some really colorful characters that I left out. There's a girl named Cassandra who's actually in most of the series, and she's from book 1. But I just didn't feel like she added much to the overall main plot of the story in that book. So out she went. And also Monica's brother, who's at the beginning of the series, the main police officer that we meet. I took him out and I replaced him with Hannah, who I think is just a more well-rounded character in terms of her development. Because Richard goes on to do something else in fairly short order.
Yeah, it was interesting too. As we were working on the script, I was reading the first book. I had, when we first met, she actually had a screenplay, a movie version of the show that she gave me, and then she gave me the books, which I didn't read in full, but I read over them and did research and that kind of thing. But it was really interesting as I was reading the first book and reading her adaptation, I would get so freaking confused. So I had to quit reading the book.
Yeah, that can happen.
You would say, did that happen in the book or did that happen in the digital series? And because while again the general storyline is of course the same and the main characters are the same, there's a lot of little subtle differences. And, you know, again, you can put a lot more into a several hundred-page novel than you can into a 65, 70-page script that's broken into 6 episodes.
Yeah,
Oh,
a lot
sure.
different. Well, and I know I've run into that whenever we would write, you know, multiple drafts of a script. And then I'm remembering lines and things from a version that was 2 or 3 versions back, or in the original version. Yeah, and then it would be like, oh no, we're on version 5. It's like, oh sure. And I'd be like, no, that's in there. And they're like, no, not anymore.
It's exactly the same problem from novels as well, because you usually do at least 3 drafts of a novel, and you can change things so dramatically, or you can change small things like a hair color or an eye color, but then 2 books later you completely revert to draft 1.
Like they dyed their hair between books 2 and 3, okay?
I've used many times.
They got contacts, you know, I mean. It could work.
Yeah.
Yeah, and to add just a little bit more layer to the confusion, well, not confusion, but just the, you know, going back and forth and figuring out where we were. You know, I mentioned Geek and Sundry was obviously one of the co-producers and distributor of the series. And so along the way, when we were doing the script and developing, then writing the script, and then during production and post, they were involved too. And so you've got myself and Rachel, and then Felicia Day and Sherry Bryant and the other Geek and Sundry producer Ryan, all involved. And so you would forget which version we were talking about. And so it's one of those things where it's good to put stuff in writing that way you can go back and be, oh, wait, this is the way it was.
Yeah.
So usually some funny stories from set.
No, never. It's a very, very serious affair.
Funny things can happen when the making of a web series or film. Is there any funny story you'd like to share with us?
I'll let Rachel go first, yeah.
I don't think Blake was there for this one, but because he was downstairs actually working, as opposed to me, who was upstairs, I don't know, doing what. But this was in the house that doubles for the glass house for us. It's a beautiful old turn of the century Victorian in Dallas, and the parts that we used for filming are really beautiful. Upstairs, there's some parts that are not so great. And one of them was kind of our makeshift production office. And at some point, I remember that there was a squirrel that ran out of the wall, capered around, you know, driving everybody to their feet and scampering over tables and people. And yeah, and of course we were filming at the time, so to be really quiet instead of screaming as the squirrel was running up your leg, which is fun.
It might have been a vampire squirrel. I don't know.
Well, I've had a squirrel run up me and run on me like a tree for quite some time, actually. And I tell you what, they got really sharp claws.
They do. Little needles.
They are. They're like little needles going up and down you. So kudos to you for being quiet.
Did you hear that, Blake, when that happened? Were you like, what's going on upstairs?
I did not. I heard later, though, because it involved our line producer, Adam Donaghy. And I heard about it later, as Rachel said. I mean, the house was a 2-story house, and so we were downstairs, far away from the shenanigans.
You could have just, if someone heard it, convinced them that the scratching in the walls was a poltergeist.
Yeah, exactly. I actually like, because I was one of the producers on the show too, I like when I don't hear about that stuff during the shoot. I'd rather just have them, you know, like the only funny story I can think of, it's not necessarily funny, is we had a couple people, a couple of the actors and crew who will remain nameless, had for some reason gone up into the attic. I guess they were just hanging out. And so somebody stepped through and their foot went through the ceiling of the house.
Oh.
And I didn't even know about this until later, and we didn't want to tell. You know, we did tell the owners of the home what had happened, but we fixed it. Some of the art department guys got up there and fixed it prior, and it would have cost a chunk of money. But it's one of those things when you're on location that especially because we shot this entire show. It was pretty ambitious. We shot it in just 10 days, two weeks.
Oh wow!
And we were we were in the house for about 6 of those days. And yeah, I mean, in the perfect world, we would have had another week for shooting, but just based on budget and logistics, et cetera, we couldn't do it. So we crammed it in, and it turned out great. But I've had previous stories where it's like I'd rather not hear about it until afterwards.
Yeah, you're like, I need to focus on what I'm doing. If something goes wrong, someone else needs to handle it.
Yeah, exactly. And on this job, which was really unique, I work with a first AD a lot named Joey Stewart, and he's great. He's been around forever, and he's a really good first AD. But we originally were going to shoot the show a little earlier, and our dates got pushed, and there was no two ways around it. We had to shoot when we shot. And so he had booked the gig, and then he also had booked a vacation. And so before we moved the dates, and so he had to leave halfway through the shoot, which if you're a filmmaker and you're used to a first AD, that's a big thing, in the middle of the shoot. But our second AD, Kelly, stepped up and did a great job. But so I had that little bit of stress going on. So I'm glad I didn't hear the other things, that often happen.
About the crazy, half-crazed squirrel.
See,
and
I suspect
the squirrel and the roof caving in and whatever else.
I suspect before they sealed the hoe, a squirrel climbed in, got stuck, and then it came out.
Yeah,
that could be it.
It's like that song Mississippi Squirrel Revival. That was hilarious.
But no, really, and I think Rachel agrees, this is one of her first jobs to work on like this, but it went extremely smoothly. I mean, to not have crazy stories is a good thing.
Yeah, it is. Rare.
Yeah,
I have worked with a lot of these same crew people, so we had a pretty well-oiled machine, and I feel like it went well.
I'm curious, Rachel, so you wrote the script for this. Have you had, up to this point, much experience writing scripts? Was it a challenge going from one type of format to the other one?
I've written a relatively limited number of scripts. I think I've done 2 feature film scripts and a couple of 1-hour scripts, but I've never done anything in this particular format before. And it is quite different in that you have to really tell a mini story that leads into the next episode fairly seamlessly. Mm-hmm. So and yet still tell the overarching story at the same time. So the nature of the story arcs was a little bit different than what I was used to. I did enjoy it. I thought it was a lot of fun. One of the things that, I think is endemic to prose writers is we just have too many words. And Blake will tell you.
Congratulations again on Geek and Sundry. I thought that was great.
Yeah, you got picked up by the Geek and Sundry channel.
I'm curious what future plans are for Morganville. Will there possibly be a second season down the road, or are you going to go a different direction? Or what's the plan? Or are you just waiting to see how the response is?
Well, I think we're kind of waiting. We're waiting a little bit in that it just came out the very end of October, so we're letting it roll a little bit and see how it goes. I think it's been really encouraging, and the response has been super good. It's still stunning to me when we go out and look at the YouTube likes. They're incredibly high.
That's good.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's right. But one thing that is interesting from a web series perspective, and I did this once before in a similar fashion for a digital series, the show I did for Warner Brothers back in 2010 called Exposed on the now defunct WBReboot.com. I think it's now CW Seed. They've switched over to that. Our shows are no longer online. That's a whole other story. But my point here is we did sort of a quasi binge release. Mm-hmm. We did 1 episode a day for a week back in summer of 2010, and that's exactly what we did for this show. And so all my other series that I've done, I think this is my 5th web series, I do the more traditional once a week, almost like traditional TV, but also having new content weekly can help build buzz and et cetera. However, I understand the flip side of that, where you do all your big marketing push and everything in the initial week that it's out. And so point is it feels like the show, we raced to get it finished and it was released in that 1 week, and then it's like, oh, it's over, it's done. But in reality, it's only been out for about 5-6 weeks. And so the response has been great, especially from the fans of the books. Really, really great. and I think we're, it's a wait and see thing, but season 2 I think is a no-brainer. But where that will be and how that will come to be is definitely something we're considering and talking about.
Mm-hmm. I was going to ask you about that with your release strategy, because you, with Continuum, Pink, and Exposed, and now Morganville, you've experimented a little bit with different types of release strategies, and that's a common question to get a lot from web series creators who are always curious how they should release. I think Netflix especially made them rethink that because of the binge viewing on Netflix. Now that you've tried both, you tried all these variations, where do you kind of stand on that fence? Like what makes sense for, let's say they're not on Geek and Sundry, for example. Let's say they're just a separate independent web series. What do you think makes sense for web series creators?
My opinion, and I think Netflix is a bad comparison when you're talking about a web series that for most web series have no celebrities and no built-in audience, so it's different. My pretty firm belief is to release them all the time, weekly. Mm-hmm. But it's good to have, like, let's say you have 10 episodes in the can, or that's what you're going to have at the end of your run. It's maybe a 12-week run or 10-week run. I would say have more than one episode online when you first premiere it. So have like 2 episodes or maybe even 3 on your channel so people can get a taste of the show. Mm-hmm. And also it depends on episode length, and that's another story, because today people tend to, they always say they want longer shows, and that's always a complaint we got. I wish your shows were longer. But then in reality, and I'm a web series viewer, I'll go to a show and I'll look down and it's like, oh, this is 20 minutes long. I can't watch this. I still think the sweet spot is between 5 and 15 minutes, depending on the show. Mm-hmm. But ultimately, I'm still a fan, and I'm not talking about Morganville here. I think what we did with Morganville actually worked, because we had a name brand book, we had name talent, and we're on a name channel, and we have Felicia Day and them helping market it. Mm-hmm. And we were part of the Hollow Week. But that's sort of a unique situation. For my other shows that were completely independent, including Pink, my very first one, that actually is probably my best performing show of all, because it was part of the right place, the right time. It was in 2007 when original content was, at least higher quality content, was new to YouTube, and so we got a lot of buzz off that. But again, we did weekly, and I feel like that gives you a chance to, that's how YouTube works. That's how your channel gets more subscribers. You want a consistent flow of fresh content. Mm-hmm. And I also think that helps with tweeting and the Facebooking. You do it all 1 week and people think it's over. It's like a movie, which is fine. But if you have an ongoing show, I think weekly is the way to go.
Okay.
Yeah. I think that makes sense. And you did with Morganville, you did sort of do what you're talking about, because you premiered with 2 episodes, didn't you? On the very first day?
We had 2 episodes out on the first day, and then we did 1 a day for the rest of the week.
And you built
again,
up.
It was part of a big promotion. Mm-hmm. So here's the deal with Morganville. We did the Kickstarter where we had 800 plus backers. She has the books that have sold, I don't even know what the number are. It's multiple million around the world. Mm-hmm. And so you have a built-in, that's like the perfect storm for that. You have all these things that an average web series or even any indie web series usually doesn't have in their back pocket.
Yeah, that's true. Mm-hmm. Now, you talked about crowdfunding. You guys did Kickstarter, did you Kickstarter or Indiegogo? I don't actually remember.
We did Kickstarter.
Okay, Kickstarter. And how was that experience for the two of you? I don't think you've done one before, Blake, that I remember, or have you? Or did you do it with Continuum? I
was loosely involved with one before, but that was the one I did with Rachel was my very first one where I was involved, completely. Mm-hmm. Although in the end, again, I go back to the book fans. It was really Rachel and her book fans that made that all happen. Obviously we worked together, and she can talk about that. That's a lot of damn work.
They are, people think it's easy money, but no.
Yeah, no.
Oh yeah, let's just throw up a Kickstarter and we'll tweet it a couple times. No, you got to work on that day and night. It is hard. It's hard.
Eating,
it's great.
You're not sleeping. Yeah.
I enjoyed the experience, but it is truly exhausting. It was a month of my life, actually more than a month, because even after you finish the Kickstarter and you're paying such constant attention to it, then you start the fulfillment process, which can take 90% of your life at least, depending on what you're offering. And we had a fairly complicated reward level structure. I've seen worse, but the most popular thing people wanted were these bunny slippers. And that's great until you realize how big they are and how many you have to have and store and ship.
Oh, yeah.
Especially worldwide. The bunny slipper campaign was, at least 3 months of my life.
I lost 3 months of my life to the bunny slipper campaign.
Yeah, but just don't take what we're saying in any way to be negative. It's just kind of facts, because people don't realize, and we didn't, or I know I didn't, how hard it is and how much work you really have to put into it if you want it to work.
Yeah, it's essentially a full-time job in and of itself.
It is.
You have to do on top of. Then if you get that on top of that, now you have more work to do because you have a project to make.
Right.
And it's such a fine line too of spamming people versus just like, hey, I'm just asking, just in case you missed it, here is the link to our Kickstarter. So anyway.
I think most of us were not raised to ask and beg for money, so it's kind of hard.
Oh, I still don't see it that way. I mean, I did when I first thought about Kickstarter. I did, but and again, it has to be the right project.
Right.
If
you don't believe in it, you're going to have a hard time convincing someone else of it.
Well, not only that, it kind of almost goes to what I was saying about the web series. If you can't get on Kickstarter as just an indie filmmaker that has never done a movie. Mm-hmm. I've seen too many of these, and I know friends of mine that have done it, and they try to raise, let's just say, $50,000, and they raise your parents and your family and friends, and you get like $3,000. Point is you got to have a built-in audience like Rachel had. That's how it works. Felicia or Will Wheaton, raised $1 million+ for Tabletop. All these people, and of course there's the notoriety factor with some of the bigger Hollywood actors, and that gets into whole other thing with should they even be using Kickstarter because they have access to money.
Yeah.
But now the way I look at Kickstarter,
although look at Veronica Mars. It wouldn't have been made even though it was studio and based off a TV show, but it was the huge fan base pushing and pushing and pushing all those years for there to be a movie, and then saying, "Hey, yeah, we'll fund a campaign because we want it so badly."
Yeah, I agree. And Rachel contributed to that one. I did not, because I do have a beef with funding a Warner Brothers show. I do have a beef with that. But when it comes to indie stuff, if you have a fan base and you have people you can reach out to, I don't see it as charity. I really don't, because they're getting something. It's almost like a pre-sale.
Well, yeah,
putting in $30
you're like buying your
DVD.
own ticket or your ticket to the show because you want to see it.
Yeah. So that's the way I look at it now. I mean, there's still differing opinions out there, and I think Kickstarter was a huge zeitgeist there. And I think it's not. I'm not going to say it's fading, but my inbox doesn't get full of Kickstarter emails like it did there most of last year. Everybody I knew was trying to raise money.
Yeah, there's like a bubble has to burst for it to kind of settle down to a usable, maintainable level. Yeah.
And then there's a lot of competitors. There's Seat and Spark, which is geared more towards film. Mm-hmm. And you mentioned Indiegogo, which has had its own successes. Mm-hmm. And they're all good in certain ways, for sure. And they can all be challenging, too.
Well, why did you guys decide Kickstarter?
Yeah.
At the time, it was the one that I was most familiar with, and I know that Blake had worked with it before. And we talked about it a week ago.
I like Kickstarter. I feel like I personally still think that's the one I would go with for any kind of project. I just feel, especially if you can get any kind of traction on their homepage, which we did not, but if you get, I just feel like you'll get more, what's the word I'm looking for?
Momentum?
Yeah, momentum, or because you're on the big boy version of it, you might, if someone else finds it you might pick up other people, I guess, because there's more people on it. It's sort of like being on Facebook versus being on MySpace.
Yeah.
That's a bad analogy.
Yeah, they do have quite a large community of.
There you go. Thank you. The community there is larger, and I think they do pretty well in the film side of things too. Although again, like I said, Seed and Spark and Indiegogo since then have both done really well.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I'm sorry, what were you going to say, Rachel, about Kickstarter?
One of the things that I thought was really interesting was as soon as we started getting out there, I think about a week out, I started getting support from some people who were just they weren't book fans. They didn't know anything about the show itself, but they liked to invest in projects based on what was really going well at Kickstarter, and that was new for me. I didn't realize that people actually just kind of went around and said, "Oh, that looks interesting. I'll throw some money in."
Yeah.
And we got some fairly good and good contributors that way.
I will say one other quick thing about Kickstarter, just real quick. Again, talking about how Rachel had a built-in audience and built-in fans, and our goal, our goal is $75,000, which is, it's a lot of money to raise, I think, through that type of avenue. It's very little money to make the show like we're trying to make.
Yeah.
And it's a fine line to walk there. But in the end, it's really, even with all her fans, and then the various people I brought in, and then, as she said, the kind of drive-bys, so to speak, we barely made it. It was hard. And that's not, my point is, lots of times, even with, there are the Zach Braffs of the world that get, whatever, $3 million in the first day. But then I think even people that have fan bases and stuff, it's a struggle, and it comes down to the wire. And I think we made it we ended up going over, which was great. We didn't have stretch goals per se, but I think with one or 2 days left, we made it.
Yeah, it's challenging. I do a crowdfunding pick of the day on Twitter. I know it's not actually every day, but when I can, I try to find the best ones or ones that appeal to me. And the majority of them have succeeded, but I found more and more they're eking in near the end usually. Mm-hmm. So it's definitely challenging. Even ones I think should do really well.
Yeah, that's kind of my point.
Now we have a lot of creators who listen, who are maybe web series creators, filmmakers, book authors, or they want to be. So I always like to try to get at least, although we have some really good tips scattered about in this interview, give a tip to help them out and just to guide you a little bit, because I'm really curious. I came off a book recently. It's a nonfiction book. So now I'm really obsessed with finding out how different authors do their books, especially fiction books, because I want to write a fiction book. And I get that question all the time from other people who want to do writing. So I'm curious, Rachel, for your book, you've done 15 books in that series. Can you describe a little bit what your method of writing is, how you approach it and keep up that momentum to have completed that series?
Well, it's funny because this series was only one of several series I was doing at the same time because I'm crazy.
She's a machine. I'm not kidding.
Well, you have to be at least a little bit nuts to do this to yourself,
Well, and you have to be a little bit nuts to do it for a living.
Yeah.
It's that kind of business. But one of the things that I try to do is set very strict office hours for myself. So I found that I work best in the morning, and that's just me. I know other people who work best at night or in the middle of the day. I do my best and fastest writing from about 5 a.m. to noon. So those are my office hours.
You're one of those morning people.
Not by choice. I would love it if it were like the leisurely 10 a.m. start time. But this actually, I can typically turn a first draft of a book in about 4 weeks that way.
Oh, wow.
That's good. How many words is your book? Like 100,000, 100?
They range between 90 and 120, maybe 125,000.
That's good.
That's good. See, I'm opposite. Like, I can function before 10 o'clock in the morning, and I do on a regular basis throughout my life, but I don't do anything that's worth seeing or reading or anything before 10:30. No matter how hard I try, no matter how much coffee I may have, my brain just goes, no, minimal is all you get until a certain time. And then it'll be like 3 a.m. and I've got a great, then I'm really energized to go.
I know at least a half a dozen New York Times authors that are exactly where you are. So,
and it probably would make, if I just gave into it, it would make for some pretty good writing. But it's hard to have a life.
it is, regardless of when you do it.
I imagine.
For your word counts, do you do outlining in advance, or are you more of an
free for all?
Yeah, a pantser, I guess, right by the seat of your pants.
Yeah, it's the plotters and the pantsers.
Can you be in between though? Can you be like a plotting pants?
Yes, you can have plotting pants. I actually do. I hate doing outlines, but I have to do them, mostly because my schedules with my publisher are so fast. I usually turn in a book and 6 months later it is out. So they have to be working on cover art and that cover copy and marketing stuff before I ever turn it in.
Oh yeah.
So quite honestly, most of the time it goes on pre-order before I've turned in the book.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
no pressure.
No pressure. Yeah, you can't be late.
Yeah, she has several other series. The main one I'm thinking of is Weather Warden, which is, how many books are there?
There were 9 in that series, and there were 4 in the spin-off series.
Oh man.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So.
And those were before.
The fun thing about it is, I like to do outlines, but then I usually forget the outline, and I only refer to it when I get bogged down.
Oh.
So it's kind of a plotter-pantser hybrid.
Now, how detailed are the outlines? Are they just a pretty vague?
They're about 5 pages long. There's a high point, I would say.
Okay.
Is there any other tip you'd like to share with a potential author listening?
I think the hardest thing about the current environment we're in right now is there are so many options. Mm-hmm. It can be a little bit of paralysis because on the one hand, it's easier now than ever to get your words out in front of people. Mm-hmm. On the downside, before you had to really, really spend a lot of time honing your craft before you could even get to that point. And now you can kind of put your words out the same day that you write them. And it can be a real problem. I always try to tell people that it's as much of a skill as it is an art, and you have to develop as a writer in order to really be able to put something out that you can be proud of long term.
Yeah.
So my biggest thing is patience.
Well, and the notion of you write it down and then wait a day or two, go back and look at it. That would probably be a really good idea for most people, even on social media. If you think you want to put something on Facebook, wait 24 hours. See if you still like it, and then put it up.
Well, it works on emails too.
Yeah, emails for sure.
Well, rewriting the second and on drafts of a book is a lot like a web series in post-production. That editing is really important to refine the original vision
and then a second pair of eyes, because you know what you mean.
And make sure everybody's got the same eye colors. Blake, about web series, is there any kind of tip you like to share with web series creators out there? You worked
other
on
than don't do it, for the love of God, don't do it.
No.
Well, there is some truth to that. I would, it's funny what Rachel just said about writing is kind of the same now, and it's not to deter people from trying, but I've been doing this a long time. I did feature films first. I still do feature films. I do web series. I also do documentaries. I do commercials. I always say I do commercials to pay for my film habit. But the truth is, it's so easy it's not easy to make something good, but it's easy to make something. And so, and as she was saying, to hone your craft, used to, it would be harder to get something out, but now you can do it, put it online, which is both great and both horrible. Mm-hmm. It's not really a tip. It's just sort of a fact of where we live. And what it does is oversaturate the market. I actually mentioned this about Morganville. While I think our numbers are pretty good, especially for today, with Pink, my first show in 2007, again, a different time and different place on the internet. That's like 50 years ago, I think, isn't it?
In internet years.
That show got 10 million views on YouTube in just a short amount of time. And the days of getting those kind of numbers, unless you're PewDiePie, those kind of guys, that just doesn't happen anymore. And I'm also seeing on YouTube it's not the end by any stretch, but it's a slowing of high quality narrative stuff. That's one reason we were excited about Geek and Sundries. They're still doing narrative on YouTube. Mm-hmm. It's hard to make money back on narrative on YouTube only, and that's why you're seeing a ton of people either that have premium channels diversify and be on Hulu and then do video on demand and et cetera. Because what really works on YouTube as far as a financial sustainability is, the vloggers, truth be told, the Michelle, how do you say her name, Sam, those kind of people, the lifestyle, and that's all great. Mm-hmm. So ultimately, this is kind of a long rant, but I'm seeing narrative. It's a great place to explore and experiment, but I wouldn't recommend making that your primary place of doing business for narrative stuff. I'm speaking of it directly. And my tip would be, though, would ultimately be to surround yourself, and this is for new and experienced people because you forget, surround yourself with really good people that know more than you.
And supportive people.
Yeah, and supportive people. But as we mentioned earlier with Morganville, most of the principal crew I'd worked with on multiple, if not half a dozen shows, and having people around you that are great at being an AD or great at DP or great production designers or et cetera. So you don't have to wear every hat. I think most indie filmmakers, including myself, feel like you kind of want to. You want to be that auteur, but you feel like you have to because the budgets wear every hat. But in reality, it can be so freeing and your work will be a lot better if you will relinquish some of those duties to other people that you trust.
That's great advice.
Yes, very much so. And it's nice to have that shorthand with somebody. You don't have to explain exactly what you can kind of finish each other's sentences or say, like that one time they're like, yeah, sure, I know. Makes a big difference.
That's very true. That's very true. And I have that with the DP since Alan Lefebvre that we worked with on this show. We worked together, pretty much I think he actually has shot all my web series. And he shot one or two of my movies as well. And we have that shorthand, and it really helps. But again, having people that really understand their place on the set or what their focus is, so you don't have to, because so many times I'm the producer, director, editor, craft service, and to just be the director on set or just be whatever really, really, really makes a big difference.
For sure.
Huge. Trust me, we know.
Is there anything else you guys like to mention? Is there any other projects you guys are doing that you like to mention before we go?
I'm working on a couple short films, and I've got a couple features, nothing that I want to really go into in too much detail, but I mentioned it earlier in our chat, we will have information on the Morganville website, which is morganvilletheseries.com, or on the Facebook page about our upcoming video on demand and DVD release, where we'll have the show playing all the episodes back to back like a movie. It's not quite feature length. It's just under 70 minutes, I think, 65 minutes. Mm-hmm. But it'll be fun to watch it in more of a traditional format on your television and with all the various goodies that you can expect on a DVD.
Cool. And Rachel?
I have a lot of stuff that's going on, but I just turned in a new book called Ink and Bone, which will be out in July 2015. I also was fortunate enough to be asked to do an X-Files short story, a collection from IDW, which I think there are 3 collections that are coming out, and I think I'm in the second one. It's edited by Christopher Golden. And then I've got another series that I'm starting, and I think we have an option running on a feature film right now, so nothing in stone, but, things are happening, I guess.
That's wonderful. Rachel, where can people find you and your work online?
I'm at rachelcaine.com and on Twitter at Rachel Caine. It's not clever, but it's direct, and on Facebook as well. And then you can usually catch me at least half a dozen conventions around the country. I'm actually going to be doing a couple of local-ish conventions to Dallas coming up. One is I think in February, and then there's another one in, I want to say March, and then I'll be off doing the circuit. Oh, one other thing I forgot to mention, my book Prince of Shadows, which came out this February, is up for Book of the Year from Romantic Times Magazine, which is great, and it's also recently been chosen for the Spirit of Texas reading list for high schools.
Oh, congratulations.
Yeah, that's really exciting for me because it's a Romeo and Juliet book, and I feel like it's a real honor to get included in that list.
Yeah.
It's a really cool book. It's a retelling sort of a Romeo and Juliet from another perspective.
Oh.
Oh,
Very nice. I'll check that out. Okay, Blake, where can people find you online?
Usually on Twitter at Blake_Calhoun, and other than that, I'm usually doing some sort of comment flame on YouTube. I'm kidding. No, Twitter and Facebook and the usual suspects. I'm around.
Do we say what the website link to Morganville is?
You know, I don't know that we have.
Morganvilleseries.com.
Okay, great.
Morganvilleseries.com.
All right, well, awesome. Thank you so much, guys, for talking to us. It's been a
really
great
appreciate
chat.
both of you taking the time to do this for us.
Thank you. It was really fun.
Yeah, thanks for having us. It was fun.
My name is Chris Stone. I'm the creator of Blood and Bone China, and you're listening to GenreTainment.
Well, thanks to Rachel and Blake for chatting with us, and we'll have links on the show description so you can check out the Morganville web series and learn more about our guests. And before we go, we want to remind you that you can keep track of us on our GenreTainment Facebook page, Marks' Twitter account, which is at Mr. Marks, our website at GenreTainment.com, or all of the shows at SciFiPulseRadio.com.
So that's it for today's GenreTainment. We'll be back soon with all new guests from our favorite films, TV shows, novels, and web series.
GenreTainment is a production of Alien Jungle Bug Productions.
Until next time.
Bad monkey.